Don't be here when I get back. I no longer want you, he told his wife. She didn't cry. She didn't argue. She just looked at him, calm and composed, and asked, "Is that all you want me to do?" When he returned, the house was empty. The walls were bare. And on the bed, he found a note. "You told me to leave, Joseph. I listened. But nothing you thought was yours was ever truly yours." That was the moment he realized his wife hadn't just left him. She had taken everything. His empire. His secrets. His power. What happens next will shock you. Before we continue, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe for more stories like this. The rain tapped lightly against the windows that evening, a soft, steady rhythm that filled the silence between Joseph Hale and his wife, Franca. They sat opposite each other at the long oak dining table, the kind of table that was meant for laughter, meals shared, and conversations that stretched late into the night. But theirs had always been different, cold, heavy, and filled with words that hurt more than they healed. Joseph pushed away his half-finished plate, wiped his mouth with a napkin, and stood. His tall frame cast a long shadow across the room, his jaw tight, his eyes sharper than the knives that lay untouched on the table. Franca, in contrast, was still, her delicate hands resting gently on the tablecloth. She wore a pale blue dress, simple but graceful, her dark hair tied loosely at the back. Her face carried no makeup, no attempt to disguise the weariness in her eyes. Yet there was something serene about her, as if the storm outside couldn't reach her heart. Joseph cleared his throat. "I'll make this plain, Franca. When I come back tonight, I don't want you here." His voice was steady, practiced, as though he had rehearsed the line in his head 100 times. Franca looked up at him slowly. For a moment, she didn't speak. The silence stretched, and Joseph grew impatient, his hand tightening around the chair he had just pulled away from the table. He expected her to plead, to cry, to ask why. That's what most women would do, he thought. Instead, Franca gave a small smile. Not a bitter smile. Not a sad smile. It was calm, almost knowing. "Is that all you want me to do?" she asked softly. Joseph's brows drew together. "What do you mean?" "You want me gone when you return. Is that the only request?" Her voice was calm, even gentle. Joseph shifted uneasily. He had imagined tears, shouting, maybe even her falling to her knees. He wanted to see the cracks in her composure. But Franca's tone was not broken, it was measured. Almost too measured. "Yes," Joseph snapped, harsher than he meant. "That's all. Don't be here when I get back. I don't want to see you in this house again." Franca's smile lingered for a moment longer, then faded into something unreadable. She lowered her gaze, as if studying the pattern of the tablecloth. "All right," she whispered. "If that's what you want." The quiet way she said it unsettled him more than if she had screamed. He wanted a fight. He wanted the satisfaction of watching her crumble under his command. But Franca only nodded as if he had asked her to turn off a light or fold a blanket. Joseph grabbed his coat from the stand by the door, his movements sharp, deliberate. He looked back at her once, expecting her to break at the last second, to rush after him with tears in her eyes. But Franca stayed seated, her back straight, her eyes distant. As he opened the door, the cold night air rushed in. He hesitated for half a breath, watching her silhouette framed by the warm light of the dining room. Something about her stillness unsettled him, but his pride forced him forward. He slammed the door behind him and walked into the rain. Inside, Franca remained where she was. She lifted her glass of water, took a slow sip, and whispered to the empty room, "If only you knew." Joseph drove through the rain, his hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than usual. The windshield wipers beat back and forth, their squeak almost in rhythm with his racing thoughts. He couldn't shake the image of Franca's smile. That smile. It wasn't the smile of a desperate woman, nor the smile of someone defeated. No, it was something else. Something he couldn't place. She should have cried, he muttered under his breath. She should have begged. He thought of the way her voice had sounded when she asked, Is that all you want me to do? It hadn't been sarcasm. It hadn't even been defiance. It was as if she had been waiting for those words. Joseph shook his head, trying to push the unease aside. For years, he had treated Franca as an afterthought. Their marriage had been convenient once, but love had dried out long ago. He had business, affairs, power, things that mattered more. Franca had been a shadow in his home, silent and dutiful. That's what he had wanted. That's what she had given him. So why, now, did her calmness unsettle him? Because she's hiding something, he whispered to himself. He tapped the steering wheel, trying to drown out the thought, but it returned again and again. The way she had smiled. The way her eyes had almost glimmered when she agreed. It was not the reaction of a woman abandoned. It was the reaction of a woman who already had her own plan. Joseph cursed under his breath. He hated not being in control. Back at the house, Franca had not moved from the dining table for nearly 10 minutes after Joseph's departure. The sound of the door slamming still lingered in the air, heavy and final. But she wasn't broken. She wasn't even surprised. She leaned back in her chair, exhaling slowly. The smile returned, faint but unmistakable. All these years, Joseph, she murmured to herself. You thought I was waiting for you. Her eyes shifted to the window, where the rain blurred the garden into a wash of grey. She stood at last, her movements graceful, deliberate. She cleared the plates from the table, one by one, setting them gently in the sink. Then she wiped the table clean, as if preparing for something new. She walked to the hallway mirror and looked at her reflection. The woman staring back at her was not the broken wife Joseph imagined. No, Franca saw strength there, a strength she had hidden, protected, and nurtured quietly while Joseph had been too blind to notice. For years, she had endured his coldness, his absence, the way he spoke to her as if she were furniture. But beneath her silence, Franca had been watching, learning, waiting. Now, the waiting was over. She picked up the phone and dialed a number she hadn't dialed in years. Her hand didn't tremble. On the third ring, a deep voice answered. Franca. She smiled again, the same calm smile she had given Joseph. It's time, Solomon. A silence followed on the line, heavy with meaning. Then a quiet laugh. I wondered how long it would take. Franca's eyes glimmered. He told me not to be here when he comes back. And you won't be, Solomon replied. But he'll never understand how much more that means. Franca's lips curved. Exactly. She hung up the phone, her heart steady, her mind clear. She walked upstairs, opened the wardrobe, and began to pack, not hurriedly, not desperately, but with care, choosing each item as if she were writing the final lines of a long, unfinished letter. Downstairs, the clock ticked softly, marking the last hours of Joseph Hale's certainty. Meanwhile, Joseph sat in his car outside his office, staring at the rain-slicked glass doors. He was supposed to go inside, supposed to bury himself in work until he had to return home and find the house empty. That was the plan. But he couldn't shake the weight in his chest. He lit a cigarette, took a long drag, and leaned back in the seat. Franca's voice echoed in his mind. Is that all you want me to do? Something about the way she had asked it felt wrong. It wasn't the voice of someone who had lost. It was the voice of someone who had already won. Joseph exhaled smoke into the dim air of the car. For the first time in years, he felt something close to fear. The rain had stopped by the time Franca zipped up the first suitcase. The night air had settled into stillness, broken only by the ticking clock on the bedroom wall. Each tick sounded like a countdown, steady and sure, marking the closing of one life and the beginning of another. Franca folded her dresses carefully, not with the frantic haste of someone running away, but with the precision of someone who had already made peace with her choice. Each item she placed in the suitcase carried memories. Meals eaten in silence, cold glances across the table, nights when she had stared at the ceiling while Joseph's side of the bed stayed empty. She paused, her fingers brushing over a silk scarf Joseph had bought her years ago. It was pale gold, soft as water under her hands. He had given it to her after a business trip abroad, not because he had thought of her, but because it was convenient. The tag had still been on it when he tossed it onto the bed, saying, "Here. Wear it to the party tomorrow. It will look expensive." She folded it neatly and set it aside, not to take, not to keep, but to leave behind. A silent relic of a marriage that had been more about appearances than love. When the suitcase was half full, Franca sat on the edge of the bed, opened a small leather-bound notebook, and began to write. Her handwriting was elegant, the ink flowing steadily across the page. She did not write apologies. She did not explain herself as if she owed Joseph reasons. Instead, her words were clipped, deliberate. "You told me not to be here when you return. I will listen. But when you come back, you will discover that what you thought you controlled was never truly yours. Not my heart, not my life, not even the home you built." She stopped, staring at the words, then closed the notebook gently and slipped it under his pillow. He would find it when the bed was empty, when the silence of the house pressed in on him. Downstairs, the phone rang suddenly. The sound was sharp in the quiet house. Franca rose, her heart steady, and answered. "Franca." The voice on the other end was soft, questioning. "It's me, Anna," Franca replied. Anna was her younger sister, a woman Joseph had never liked. He had called her too opinionated, which, in Joseph's world, meant too unafraid. "Are you sure about this?" Anna asked. "Leaving like this, it's not just walking away. It's war." Franca leaned against the wall, closing her eyes for a moment. "I'm not just leaving. I'm taking back what's mine. For years, I stayed quiet, thinking that was what strength looked like. But silence only fed him." Anna's voice softened. "And Solomon? You spoke to him?" "Yes." A small smile touched Franca's lips. "He understands. He always has." A pause. Then Anna whispered, "Joseph doesn't know, does he?" "No," Franca said firmly. "And that's what unsettles him. He thinks silence is weakness. He doesn't realize silence can be strategy." Anna let out a small laugh. "I'll have a place ready for you. You won't be alone when you walk out of there." "Thank you," Franca said quietly. "But Joseph must believe this is only about leaving. He must never see the rest coming." As Franca hung up the phone, the clock struck midnight. She looked around the house one last time, every corner etched with years of bitterness, every room heavy with unspoken words. For the first time in years, she felt something like freedom rising in her chest. Joseph sat at his desk in the office, a glass of whiskey untouched at his elbow. The rain had cleared outside, leaving the city lights to shimmer against the wet pavement. Normally, nights like this brought him satisfaction. He liked the quiet of the office, the hum of the building's heating system, the knowledge that his empire was built on his own hard edges. But tonight, he couldn't focus. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Franca's face. That smile. That calmness. It gnawed at him like a thorn he couldn't pull out. He lit another cigarette, the smoke curling toward the ceiling. He told himself he didn't care what she did. If she left, good. It was overdue. He wanted her gone. So why did he feel unsettled? The buzz of his phone broke the silence. Joseph frowned and glanced at the screen. The name glowed like a ghost from the past. Solomon Gray. His old friend. His old rival. For a moment, Joseph considered ignoring it. But curiosity won. He answered. "Joseph." Solomon's voice came through the line, smooth, steady, almost amused. "It's been a long time." Joseph leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing. "What do you want, Solomon?" "I heard you've been busy. Building. Expanding. Tearing down whatever gets in your way." There was a pause, deliberate. "But you've never been good at seeing what's right in front of you, have you?" Joseph's jaw tightened. "Speak plainly." "All right," Solomon said. His tone sharpened, cutting through the air like a knife. "You never valued what you had. Some things don't wait for you to come back, Joseph. Some things leave before you even realize they're gone. Joseph's hand froze on the desk. For a moment, he forgot to breathe. What are you talking about? But Solomon only chuckled, low and dark. I'll let you figure that out. I just wanted you to know. Not everything is yours to command. Not anymore. The line clicked dead. Joseph stared at the phone in his hand, his pulse racing. Solomon had always been clever with his words, always knew how to twist the knife just enough. But tonight, his words struck deeper. He thought of Franca again. Her calmness. Her smile. Could it be? No, Joseph whispered. He pushed the thought away, refusing to let it take root. Franca was quiet, obedient, forgettable. She wasn't capable of scheming, wasn't capable of betrayal. She was just Franca. And yet, the unease in his chest grew heavier. Joseph poured himself the whiskey and downed it in one swallow. But the burn in his throat did nothing to drown out the image of Franca's smile, nor the echo of Solomon's voice. Some things don't wait for you to come back. He slammed the glass down on the desk, the sound sharp in the empty room. Damn them both, he muttered. But deep inside, where his pride couldn't shield him, a flicker of fear began to take shape. The morning sun rose pale and thin, seeping through the curtains of the Hale house. The rain had passed, leaving the air fresh and sharp, but the house itself carried the same heavy silence as the night before. Franca stood in the kitchen, brewing tea. The kettle hissed quietly on the stove. She moved with the grace of routine, but her eyes were sharp, alive. She wasn't the same quiet woman who once lingered at this counter, waiting for Joseph to toss her a glance. No, Franca was awake in a way she hadn't been in years. She sat at the table, her hands wrapped around the warm mug, and let her mind wander through the years of their marriage. People had always assumed she was weak. Joseph most of all. She remembered the early days, when Joseph was ambitious and charming. He would come home full of stories, his energy lighting up every room. She had believed in him then. Believed in the man he could be. But the ambition soon turned into pride, and the pride into coldness. He no longer saw her as a partner but as a fixture in the house, something to be kept, not cherished. At first, Franca fought to hold his attention. She had dressed carefully, spoken gently, tried to please him in every way she knew. But Joseph never noticed. And slowly, she had let the silence fall between them. He thought she had surrendered. But she hadn't. In her silence, Franca had been learning. She had watched how Joseph ran his business, how he manipulated people, how he cut corners. She noticed the files left on his desk, the whispered phone calls he thought she couldn't hear. She began keeping her own quiet records, papers copied, conversations written down, details stored away. Years of observation had built into something larger, a truth Joseph never suspected. Franca rose from the table, walked to the study, and unlocked the drawer where she kept her hidden folder. Inside were documents neatly organized, bank transfers, contracts Joseph had forged, evidence of corruption tucked between the lines of deals he had made. She flipped through them, her face calm. These weren't the notes of a desperate wife. They were weapons. Her phone buzzed on the desk. A message appeared from Anna. He called Solomon. Be ready. Franca's lips curved into a faint smile. Joseph's panic was predictable. He could never stand the idea of not being in control. His pride made him careless, blind to the truth. She had stopped belonging to him long ago. She typed back a reply. I am ready. I've been ready for years. Sliding the documents back into the folder, she closed the drawer and locked it again. Then she looked around the study one last time. The smell of Joseph's cologne still lingered faintly in the air, clinging to the leather chair. Franca whispered, almost to herself, you thought silence was surrender. But silence is where I built my strength. Later that afternoon, she dressed in a soft cream blouse and a long skirt, simple but elegant. She pinned her hair neatly and applied just enough lipstick to highlight the curve of her smile. Then she stepped outside, the autumn air cool on her skin, and walked toward the cafe where she was meant to meet Solomon. As she walked, she felt lighter, as though every step carried her further from the cage she had lived in. She wasn't walking away in shame. She was walking toward her future, one Joseph had never imagined she was capable of shaping. The cafe was quiet, tucked away on a corner street lined with trees that swayed gently in the afternoon breeze. It was the kind of place Joseph would never enter, too ordinary, too unremarkable for a man who lived for grand gestures and appearances. Franca pushed open the door, the small bell above it chiming softly. Inside, the air smelled of roasted coffee and cinnamon. The hum of quiet conversation floated around her, but her eyes went directly to the man seated in the far corner. Solomon Gray. He rose as she approached, his tall frame casting a familiar shadow. His hair had grayed slightly at the temples, but his eyes, sharp, dark, steady, were the same as she remembered. He had once been Joseph's closest friend, but years ago, something had severed that bond. Solomon had left quietly, taking with him a silence as heavy as Franca's. Now, as Franca reached his table, she saw the same calm strength in him that she had always admired. "Franca," he greeted her, his voice deep, low, carrying both warmth and gravity. He pulled out the chair for her. "Solomon," she replied, settling into the seat. Her smile was small, but it held meaning. For a moment, they said nothing. The silence was comfortable, filled with the weight of unspoken history. Then Solomon leaned forward, his gaze fixed on her. "I knew one day you'd call me," he said quietly. Franca tilted her head. "You sound so sure." He gave a faint smile. "Because Joseph never understood what he had. He never noticed the fire in you. But I did." Her chest tightened, though she kept her expression calm. "He thought I was weak." "He wanted you to be weak," Solomon corrected. "It made it easier for him to rule over you. But weakness isn't what I saw the night we first met. Do you remember?" Franca's eyes softened. She remembered. A dinner party, years ago. Joseph had paraded her around like a prize, then abandoned her to his business partners. Solomon had been the only one who noticed her discomfort. He had spoken to her like she mattered, like her presence had meaning. "I remember," she whispered. Solomon leaned back, studying her carefully. "And now? What do you want from me, Franca?" Her gaze did not waver. "Not rescue. Not pity. I want partnership." Solomon's brows lifted slightly, impressed. "Partnership?" "Yes." Franca's voice was steady. "Joseph believes he owns everything. Me, the house, even his business. But he has built his empire on lies and theft. I have the proof. What I need is someone who knows how to use it. Someone who won't hesitate when the moment comes." Solomon's eyes darkened, considering her words. Then he nodded slowly. "You've been preparing this for a long time." "Years," Franca admitted. "Every insult, every silence, every night he left me behind, I was watching, listening, building. He thought I was invisible. But invisibility is power, Solomon. You can see everything when no one sees you." Solomon's lips curved into a smile, admiration clear in his eyes. "Joseph has no idea who he's dealing with." "No," Franca said quietly. "But he will." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of her words filling the space between them. Then Solomon reached across the table, not to hold her hand, but to tap his finger lightly against hers, a gesture of solidarity, of alliance. "When he returns tonight," Solomon said, "he'll think he's won. He'll walk into that house expecting emptiness, expecting silence. But what he'll find will break him." Franca's smile was calm, unshaken. "That's what he asked for. He told me not to be there when he came back. And I won't be. But what he doesn't know," she paused, her voice low, deliberate, "is that when I leave, I'll take everything with me." Solomon's eyes burned with quiet pride. "Then it begins." Franca lifted her teacup, sipping slowly. Her hand was steady, her heart unshaken. For the first time in years, she wasn't living in Joseph's shadow. She was standing in her own light. As she set down the cup, she whispered almost to herself, "This isn't the end, Joseph. This is the beginning." The drive back to the Hale house was longer than usual. Joseph gripped the steering wheel hard enough that his knuckles whitened, the road ahead blurring as his thoughts churned. He couldn't shake Solomon's words. "Some things don't wait for you to come back." The voice echoed, threading itself with Franca's calm smile, her steady words, "Is that all you want me to do?" He told himself it was nonsense. Franca wouldn't dare betray him. She didn't have the strength, didn't have the nerve. She was a shadow of a woman, content to stay quiet. That was the Franca he knew. But doubt pressed against him like a weight on his chest. By the time he pulled into the driveway, his heart was hammering harder than he cared to admit. The house loomed before him, dark against the pale evening sky. He noticed the garden gate slightly open, swaying in the wind. Franca always closed it. Always. He stepped out of the car, the crunch of gravel under his shoes unusually loud. His key slid into the lock, and the door opened without resistance. Inside, the silence was deafening. "Franca," he called, his voice rough. No answer. The hallway smelled faintly of her perfume, but the air was too still. He walked into the living room, his eyes darting across the space. Something was off. The family portraits that had lined the wall were gone, leaving pale squares where the frames had hung. The vase on the side table was missing too. Even the books from the shelves had disappeared. His stomach twisted. He moved quickly from room to room, kitchen, dining room, study. Empty spaces stared back at him. Upstairs, he threw open the bedroom door. The wardrobe was half empty, the drawers pulled out, clothing gone. On the bed lay a folded sheet of paper. Joseph's throat tightened. He reached for it, his fingers trembling despite himself. He unfolded the note and read, "You told me not to be here when you came back. I listened. But when you walk through these rooms, remember this. Nothing you thought you owned was ever truly yours. Not me. Not this home. Not even the empire you built. Franca." Joseph crushed the paper in his fist, his jaw clenching. "No," he muttered. "She wouldn't." But the evidence surrounded him. The empty spaces, the missing belongings, the silence that pressed into his bones. She was gone. He sat heavily on the bed, the mattress dipping under his weight. His hand brushed against the pillow, and something hard slid beneath it. He pulled out a leather-bound notebook. Franca's handwriting filled the pages. Notes, dates, details of conversations, copied bank records. His bank records. His deals. His crimes. Joseph's vision blurred as he flipped through the evidence. His own secrets stared back at him, neat and damning in her delicate script. His pulse thundered in his ears. He stood abruptly, pacing the room. "She's not capable of this," he whispered. "She's not." But she was. He remembered now how calm she had been at dinner, how steady her voice had sounded. Not resignation. Preparation. The image of Solomon rose in his mind, his rival's voice curling around his pride like smoke. "Not everything is yours to command. Not anymore." Joseph's chest burned. The truth was unavoidable. Franca had outmaneuvered him. He slammed his fist against the wall, the sound echoing through the empty house. "Franca!" he roared, though he knew she couldn't hear him. The silence that followed was louder than any reply. The next morning, Joseph's office was chaos. He arrived to find his secretary pale and trembling, a stack of urgent memos on her desk. She tried to speak, but the words stumbled over each other. "Sir, the accounts, there's been." Joseph brushed past her, storming into his office. The phone on his desk was already ringing. He snatched it up. "Joseph Hale," he barked. "Mr. Hale, this is Investigator Crowley. We've received a set of documents regarding fraudulent transfers tied to your company. We'll need you to come in for questioning." Joseph's grip on the phone tightened. "What documents?" "Detailed records. Signed contracts. Bank statements. They appear authentic. Joseph's stomach dropped. Franca's notebook. I don't know what you're talking about, he snapped. I'll have my lawyer contact you. He slammed the phone down, his hand shaking. His secretary appeared at the door, holding out more papers. Sir, the bank froze several accounts this morning. They said there were flagged transactions. Joseph snatched the documents from her, scanning them with frantic eyes. His offshore accounts. His safety nets. All frozen. He staggered back against his chair, the room tilting around him. Franca. It was her. It had to be her. His phone buzzed again. A message this time. Unknown number. He opened it, and his chest tightened at the words. You told me not to be there when you came back. I listened. But now, Joseph, it's your turn to leave. No name. No signature. But he didn't need one. His vision blurred with rage. He grabbed his coat and stormed out of the office, ignoring the stares of his staff. He needed answers. He needed to find her. Meanwhile, across town, Franca sat in Solomon's study, sunlight streaming through tall windows onto the wooden floor. The folder of Joseph's documents lay open on the desk between them. Solomon leaned over the papers, his expression sharp but satisfied. You've given them everything they need to take him down, he said quietly. Franca nodded, her hands folded neatly in her lap. It's all his. His own arrogance wrote his downfall. I only collected the pieces. Solomon looked at her, admiration in his eyes. You've done more than collect, Franca. You've dismantled him. For a long moment, she was silent. Then she spoke, her voice steady. He told me to be gone when he returned. I obeyed. But obedience doesn't mean surrender. It means timing. And the timing is mine now. Solomon smiled faintly, though there was gravity in his gaze. He'll come for you. I know, Franca said calmly. But when he does, he'll realize there's nothing left to take. She rose from the chair, walked to the window, and looked out at the quiet street below. For the first time in years, she felt air in her lungs that wasn't heavy with his shadow. He thought I was a ghost in his house, she murmured. Now I'll be the ghost that haunts him. Back at the Hale house, Joseph sat in the study, Franca's notebook still open before him. His pride had been shattered, his empire cracking under the weight of her silent war. He stared at her words, his fists clenched, his breath ragged. You think you've won, he muttered into the empty room. But this isn't over, Franca. Not with Solomon. Not with anyone. But even as he spoke, a part of him knew, the war had already turned. And this time, he wasn't the one holding the power. Joseph Hale had been many things in his life, ruthless, ambitious, feared. He had fought his way through business deals like a soldier through battle, leaving behind casualties who never recovered. He had built an empire with cold hands and sharp words. But now, as he sat in the ruins of his office, papers strewn across his desk, investigators circling like vultures, Joseph felt something he hadn't felt in years, weakness. The newspapers hit him first. Business tycoon Hale under investigation. Insider documents reveal fraudulent empire. Each headline was a dagger. His name, once spoken with respect and fear, was now dripping with scandal. He slammed the paper down, his face burning. Franca, he hissed. You'll regret this. But the truth gnawed at him. She had outmaneuvered him completely. Later that evening, Joseph drove aimlessly through the city streets, the weight of betrayal heavy in his chest. He found himself in a part of town he hadn't visited in years, quiet, unassuming, lined with old brick buildings. His headlights caught sight of a familiar figure walking along the sidewalk. Franca. She was dressed simply, her hair pinned back, her step steady. Beside her walked Solomon Gray. They weren't holding hands, but their closeness spoke volumes. They moved in sync, as if the world around them didn't exist. Joseph's grip tightened on the steering wheel. His teeth ground together. He had expected Franca to run, to hide, to scatter like a frightened bird. But instead, here she was, walking freely, boldly, as though she owned the ground beneath her feet. He pulled the car over sharply, the tires screeching. He stepped out, slamming the door behind him. "Franca!" he roared across the street. She stopped, turning slowly. Solomon paused beside her, his eyes narrowing as Joseph stormed forward. "Joseph," Franca said softly, almost kindly, as though addressing a restless child. Her calmness infuriated him. "What have you done?" he spat. "You think you can tear me down? You think you can destroy everything I built?" Franca tilted her head, her lips curving into that same unsettling smile. "I didn't destroy it, Joseph. You did. I only showed the world what was already there." Solomon stepped closer, his presence solid and unwavering. "You were always blind, Joseph. Blind to her. Blind to me. Blind to the cracks in your own empire." Joseph's hands shook. Rage, humiliation, despair, they twisted inside him like knives. "You think this is victory? Standing there with him, smiling at me as though I'm nothing." Franca's eyes softened, though her voice remained firm. "This isn't about Solomon. It never was. This is about me. About the years I spent invisible, the years you dismissed me as if I were furniture in your house. You told me not to be there when you came back. And so I obeyed. But obedience doesn't always mean defeat." Her words struck him harder than any weapon could have. For the first time, Joseph felt the full weight of what he had lost, not just his business, not just his reputation, but the woman he had never truly seen. Franca's smile lingered as she turned to Solomon. "We should go." Together, they walked away, their steps steady, leaving Joseph standing alone in the cold night. His chest heaved with rage, but beneath it was something worse, emptiness. For the first time, Joseph Hale was powerless. Weeks passed, and Joseph's world collapsed piece by piece. Investigations stripped him of his assets. Court hearings humiliated him in front of peers who once envied his success. The staff who had once bowed to him now avoided his gaze. His empire, once unshakable, crumbled like sand through his fingers. But none of it cut deeper than the silence of his home. He returned each night to the empty house, its walls echoing with absence. The portraits were still gone, the rooms stripped bare. Even the air felt hollow, as though Franca's departure had pulled the very life out of the space. On sleepless nights, he would find himself in their bedroom, staring at the indent in the mattress where she had once slept. He would pull out her notebook from his drawer, flipping through the pages not to study the evidence he had already lost, but to see her handwriting, to trace the curves of her letters, to imagine the steadiness in her hand as she wrote. Every word was a reminder that while he had dismissed her as silent, she had been building power in that silence all along. And always, always, he remembered her smile. That last smile at the cafe, the smile in the street, the smile across the dining table when he had said, "Don't be here when I get back." It haunted him. One evening, broken by exhaustion, Joseph wandered into the garden. The air was cool, carrying the scent of wet earth. He sat on the stone bench where Franca had once tended her flowers. He remembered mocking her for wasting time on trivial things. He had never noticed the peace it gave her. Now, he sat among the weeds that had grown wild in her absence, his head in his hands. "Is that all you want me to do?" he whispered, her words echoing in his mind. For the first time, Joseph understood. She hadn't been asking in confusion or despair. She had been asking with certainty, with quiet power. She had known then what he was only realizing now. She wasn't leaving in defeat. She was leaving in triumph. Far away, in another part of the city, Franca stood on a balcony with Solomon. The night air brushed against her face as she looked out at the lights of her new beginning. She wasn't laughing, wasn't gloating. She was simply free. Solomon stepped beside her, his presence steady. "Do you ever think of him?" he asked. Franca was silent for a moment. Then she answered softly, "I think of the man he believed he was, but not of the man he truly was." She turned her face towards Solomon, her calm smile returning. And I think of how much stronger silence can be than noise. Solomon studied her, then nodded. And now? Now, Franca said, her voice firm, I live. Back in the empty Hale house, Joseph stared out into the darkness of the garden, her smile etched permanently in his memory. It wasn't the smile of a woman defeated. It was the smile of a woman who had been unseen until it was too late. And Joseph Hale knew he would never escape it. The last smile. If this story gripped you, don't let it end here. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss the next twist. And if you felt the tension, the betrayal, and the power in silence, drop a comment below with your favorite moment. Your thoughts might just shape the next story we tell. Until then, keep watching, keep feeling, and remember, every smile has a story behind it.